Hello and welcome. I am Annemie, and today I'm going to be starting a new, hopefully weekly series which I'm calling Euro Truck Soliloquy. The idea is that I'm going to be playing some Euro Truck Simulator and talking. Probably going to mention some news things that interest me, whether from gaming or in general, maybe current news, maybe stuff that's a little bit older than that. And I'm just going to chat for a bit. So, to start with, the game, Euro Truck Simulator. I'm sure that a lot of you have seen this before. And the way I'm going to play it is I'm not going to be worrying too much about the technicality, so I'm using a gamepad for this. In terms of gameplay settings, I am not having fatigue, I'm not having traffic offences, because I mostly want this just to be a background thing to happen while I talk to you lovely people. Okay, so my first job is taking some fertiliser from London to Dover. Let's go! So I've been playing a little bit of Euro Truck Simulator. I've not played a huge amount before. I've logged 19 hours in a different save, and before we actually get to... Actually, let's add that mirror up there and change some of the settings. Let's increase this field of view, I think. Let's take this up. 100. Let's actually lower my seat a little bit. There we are. So, I'm in the middle of another game on my laptop. This is the desktop, so you can get slightly higher graphical settings going on here. But one thing that did frustrate me is that you can't just take your save files. It doesn't save them on the Steam cloud, which is unfortunate. But hey ho, just gonna start a new one because I can't really be bothered to keep transferring save files across computers whenever I want to play this. So we're going to start completely afresh. Okay, so I've got a few topics I've written down. I've got no idea how long talking about them is going to last for. Oh, that was a bit of a close call. I'm hoping some amount of time. I don't want to talk for over an hour and don't want to talk for less than 20 minutes, but anything between there I am good with. So I think I'm going to start with a news story I saw earlier today, and it was about Football Manager, which is a series of games which I don't play. I'm not that interested in football. I played them a little bit in the past. I used to like football a bit more when I was younger, but not so much anymore. And there was a news story which came out, that's a rather apropos choice of words, that, where are the traffic lights? Oh, there are traffic lights ahead of me. Could have just used those. Okay. There was a news story that came out which said that there will be a news story available in Football Manager games coming up, saying that players will occasionally come out as gay. Now, I can imagine that there's going to be a bit of a backlash from the same people who dislike gay romances in BioWare games, being along the lines of, oh, stop thrusting the gay agenda in our faces. That's what they all sound like, of course. But I'm not one of those people. I disagree with Football Manager's choice here for a completely separate reason. And that's that it seems to be... Oh. Let's try going backwards a little bit. That did not work out. You can see I'm not really paying attention. But it seems to be making it to be that coming out is a news event. Right? Now, I'm sure that football as a pastime is possibly a little bit more socially conservative, so it might still be harder to come out in those sorts of circles than it would be if you were, say, in the theatre, right? To take a cliched example. But we've had quite a few now. It's no longer news. And it just seems to be wanting to ride this publicity train of, oh, look how progressive we are as a game series. We want to fly the rainbow flag and be loved by all you queer people. And it just comes across as a little bit grasping. Particularly when... Let me actually see if I can find the quote going on here. So... one of the developers, director, there we go. Sorry, it's quite hard to concentrate, well, to half concentrate on this and also read quotes on a different computer screen. Said that in countries where it's still illegal to be gay, in those cases we have simply respected their laws, so if a player is based in one of those countries, the player won't come out. And it's that that really gets at me. If you're wanting to make a big sign that you're trying to champion progressive values, you're trying to stand up for queer people, that you're wanting to make it easier for people to currently be gay, and to, as the director says, it shouldn't be a big thing. It says that, I just think it's crazy that in 2017 we are in a world where people can't be themselves. And that's true. But the way to get there isn't to make it a news story when a player comes out in your fictional football game. Well, the game isn't fictional, but you know what I mean. But it's to normalize it. It's one thing that I appreciated quite a lot about Saturday Morning Breakfast serial comics. I'm sure that others have done it as well, where the author of those comics said that essentially if there was going to be a couple in his cartoons, he wouldn't really think about their gender. They would just be whatever they happened to be at the time, which is good. Because obviously in that sort of circumstance, gay isn't a personality trait, it's not a subject for humour, it's just a fact of life, right? And I think the way that Football Manager could have done that, whoops, did not mean to touch that, let's change that up, is they could still have had news stories involving gay players, but imagine something along the lines of this. Manchester United star Frederick Engelbert has painted the town red in Manchester last night by partying until the small hours of the morning with his husband, Jared. Right, you're still... For me, that's showing a bigger message of inclusivity by saying that this is normal, this isn't something that has to be announced, it's not something deviant. It doesn't deviate from the norm. It is a norm. If Football Manager had done that, I would be applauding them to high heaven. I still wouldn't play any of their games, because football management doesn't hugely appeal to me. But I would like that it existed. As it is, it feels like a cash grab at a time where lots of other games have done queer relationships so much better and for a really long time. I mean, I can't remember the first game that I played that had queer relationships, but I think Dragon Age must have been one of the earlier ones. For me, at least. That game's ancient now. And it's just a bit of a shame that it still has to be a thing of note. But there we go. So we've nearly dropped off this fertilizer at Dover. I'm sure I've broken a lot of laws on the way here. Okay, so we're coming up. I'm also not really going to bother parking these things. This is literally just to have some amount of moving pictures going on while I talk. Satisfactory. Don't even remember getting damaged, but fine. You guys probably saw, but as I mentioned, I'm not really paying attention, and I'm also looking at my computer screen, which is dividing my attention even further. It's also moderately early in the morning, so I'm not hugely with it. Yeah, I've got a headquarters. It's just corrugated iron. Cool. Let's go through that. Can't get to the bank yet, so let's get another quick job, I guess. Let's go. Price per distance. Is that going in the right direction? Yes. London to Calais. Let's do this thing. Okay, so that was the first thing I want to talk about. If any of you listening have got any comments, please do put them in the comments. I will read them. And if there's something that convinces me, I'll probably bring it up on a future episode. I really wish there were a button on the controller that lets you recenter the view without having to go to the keyboard. That's a bit of a pain. Nope. Okay. I hate roundabouts. I don't actually drive myself. And as you might have noticed from this, it's probably a good thing that I don't drive. Oh. I noticed that damage. Oh, does that actually change any of the visuals going on? Don't think so. Oh well. Okay. So the next thing I want to talk about is a little bit of an older topic. Not by that much. But it's Wolfenstein. Oh. I have new mail. Let's find out what this mail actually is. How exciting. That's less exciting. Okay then. So yeah, it's Wolfenstein, the new Colossus, and the controversy that has been generated therein in the fact that it is a game where you are killing Nazis. This has been an uncontroversial premise for the Wolfenstein series and for games in general for probably about 3 decades or so. I mean, this is a series which featured one of its final bosses as being Mecha Hitler wielding quadruple Gatling guns. It doesn't do subtlety. It doesn't do deep political statements. It has two simple premises. Shooting things is fun, and Nazis are twazzoks. But in 2017, that premise has become controversial. Now, for those of you who don't know, the rebooted version of Wolfenstein, starting from the New Order, has been set in an alternate history past ... where the Nazis won World War II and everything is rubbish. So New Order was set in the 60s with B.J. Blazkowicz killing lots and lots of Nazis who were the controlling powers in Europe. The new Colossus is set in the States, and now the idea of killing Nazis in the States has some people upset. I am going to call these people Nazis. if you are associating yourself with Nazis, then it is very probable that your views are somewhat problematic. If you are a white supremacist who wants to kick out people from your country because they are not white, then I can see why you might associate with the Nazis. But you're a twazak. Ignoring the fact that in a lot of these cases, the original inhabitants of this land weren't white. Now, I lived in Australia for about a year and a half. And the the attitude of some people on the political right, they're people who were elected, it always felt to me as if they never had any sort of grasp on irony. They would say that we don't want any of these immigrants in here, and yet they are as white as the driven snow, and their surname is Hansen, which is Scandinavian in origin. Now, I don't know how much you as an audience know about Australia, but Australia is not in Scandinavia, and the original inhabitants of Australia are not white. Of course, you have a similar thing in America, but that's not something I've personally witnessed, although I have heard reports of there being similarities going on there. Where it gets even more extreme is there was this story that I read about a couple of years ago now. So Australia has this annual Australian of the Year award, which is meant to honour Australian people who do great things above and beyond the call of duty, humanitarian work, social work. Essentially just saying, hey, you guys are good people. And this person was on the way back for an Australian of the Year award, where they were nominated to be Australian of the Year. Couldn't get a taxi. Taxis would not stop for this individual, would not pick them up, because they had big bushy white beard, and they appeared to be one of the Aboriginal Australians, a member of one of the many tribes across Australia who were here, there, long before Cook landed. And there is nothing to stop people discriminating against these people. There was a long... Oh. Well, that's not going well. And that just breaks my heart. These people are caricatured in Australia as always being drunk as well. And there have been various controversies around that. Now, I can't claim to be incredibly versed in Australian culture. Said I was only there for a year and a half, and I was based in a university there, so I wasn't getting to the heart of, quote-unquote, the real Australia. Why is it so dark at 1 PM? Maybe it's me. Let's turn my lights off. Why not? But even the glimpses I did see, it breaks my heart. And let's grant the white supremacists' premise for a moment. Let's say, yep, there are differences between the races, and white people are unequivocally better. Let's grant that premise. how is it then okay to treat other people like crap? How do you get from the justification that one race is better to another race should be expelled from their home, they should never see their friends again? How do you get from saying that, oh, hey, you guys, because of an accident of birth, you can't do what I do, you haven't got my immense fedora-wearing brain power? Well, sucks to be you, because I am going to use this brain power to try and make your life as unpleasant as possible. How do you not go, oh, I'm sorry, let me try and use some of the things which I have been given as an accident of birth to try and make the deficiencies which birth has given you a bit easier to deal with. Right? If we have a, let's say, a disabled relative, quite often you'll give up your time to try and make things easier for them, to make things nicer for them. Now, I'm not saying that there are differences between the races, and all the evidence which I've seen appears to say precisely the opposite. But even if you think that, it takes a spectacular amount of insensitivity to then say, you people are not welcome here. And it then takes an even greater amount of insensitivity to be like, hey, you guys who are against Nazis, stop that. Because we're kind of similar to these Nazi people and we don't want you to kill us, maybe? But it just fills me somewhat with despair. Although I read another interesting article on Wolfenstein a couple of days ago, I think, which was along the lines of that the real villains in the new Colossus aren't actually the Nazis. That it is the people with evil in their heart the whole time, that the Nazis were essentially a force of nature. As the article says, evil made manifest. But it's the people who are comfortable with them. Essentially, the Nazi sympathizers. The people who should know better. Now, I'm not entirely comfortable with this analysis because that suggests that the Nazis themselves haven't made any choices along the way, right? Nazism isn't like being a volcano. Or, if we want to put it in the world of Fallout, like being a nuclear bomb and then setting up a cult to worship this nuclear bomb, right? The Nazis have agency, they can choose not to be Nazis. It might be difficult, they might end up in personal danger, but it is a choice they can make. But I think that is a more pointed political statement. So I think it's somewhat disingenuous for the designers to say that the game isn't making any sort of political statement. I think that one thing that I remember them saying previously was that when they started creating the game, they didn't intend for it to be a controversial subject. Which I think was true. What, Wolfenstein The New Order came out in 2014, so this game's probably been in development since probably 2015, maybe early 2016. So Trump might have been a thing which existed politically at that point, but probably not. And even if he did, he was still considered by a joke even within the Republican primaries. Until, of course, he wasn't. But so I think it was probably accidental that this game became relevant. But I think now that it has, the developers have very much lent into it. Which is a good thing. I like it when games decide to be more than just the visceral pleasure. I mean, I'm not asking for Euro Truck Simulator to start giving me lectures on Nietzschean philosophy. But games making political points is good. There was also, I saw a little Easter egg type thing going on, which made fun of the Mother Jones article of "Meet Richard Spencer, the dashing young white supremacist," something along that, something with dashing white supremacist type thing. This just sickening display of trying to almost sort of rehabilitate this individual, saying along the lines of, yeah, this person's views may be abhorrent, but look at how handsome he is. It just doesn't fly. And it's quite frankly disgusting. And there is a nice little roundabout. I bloomin' hate roundabouts. Huh. Interesting. It seems like the achievements are being calculated separately on my different games. That's interesting. I mean, it's not that interesting, but regardless. It just somewhat baffles me, and I think the politics is starting to baffle everybody at the moment, so I'm not... Oh, while I'm through that light now, might as well keep turning. Oh. This has not been a good journey. Let's try this again. Turns out that driving a lorry might be difficult. But yeah. And it's also not as if people being called Nazis has been particularly unusual in internet discourse either, so it seems to me that the people associating with the villains of Wolfenstein might have somewhat of a guilty conscience about themselves. But we'll see. Okay, what do I want to do? Let's get some of that. I want to be able to carry some explosives, because I, of course, myself am a Nazi. Email. Excellent. Let's get us a loan. 80,000. Yep. Let's go to truck dealer. There, let's visit him. So how many can we get? Well, we can get one, obviously, but I'll stick between those two. One's got more horsepower. I don't really know what I'm looking at, in all honesty. I mean, that one's got more horsepower, that's the only number difference I see, but the other one's more expensive, but... yeah, all the other ones are more expensive. Let's get that one. Okay. Let's see what jobs are available. London, let's narrow it to that. Reservoir tank seems to be the biggest thing. I always love the fact that you can just transport yogurt. Some of the cargo for me is genuinely amusing, if only for its mundanity. Mundanity? For the fact that it is mundane. Okay. Let's head out of here. So I guess the next topic on my list is Spain. This is not a video game thing, but just the fact that Spain seems to be having some interesting times at the moment. I must confess that, like a lot of people, I am not particularly versed in... It's a lot harder, I'm going to have to reach further. I'm not particularly versed in Spanish politics. I was aware in advance of the divisions between Spain and Catalonia. A friend of the family has themselves a lot of family out in Spain. Which one was it? It was the reservoir tank. Let's get that one. And what a lot of people might not know is that there are actually the people of the main Spanish area of Spain and the Catalans speak a completely different language. So it is in effect a country of two peoples. And always has been. Now, if they want to be together, that's great. If they want to not, it doesn't seem right for one half to try to dictate to the other. Now, being in Britain, being British, we had this a few years ago with Scotland. Scotland decided to stay. Of course, this is while we were still part of the EU, so I wonder how that vote would change if it were to be had now. Good. No damage yet. This is good. Yeah, so I wonder how that would change now. Well then. Let's have a look at this mail. I'm just really popular. Okay then. I mean, I'm already on a journey, if that's okay with you. But it seems to me that self-determination is crucial. I don't really care whether or not Catalonia stays to be a part of Spain. Right, there was a counter-demonstration in Barcelona. I think it was yesterday at time of recording. So probably a couple of days ago at time of upload. Come on, go faster. I know you're going at the speed limit. Let's it this way then. These people seem to be going faster. As in, if you want to stay being part of Spain, make that known. But let's not have that be through force. Clearly, a lot of people feel very strongly about this. They felt so strongly as to have an unofficial referendum where the police were instructed to shut down any of these ballots that were happening. And yet people still turned out, people still voted. And the government of Catalonia, despite full knowledge of any consequences that might occur, also voted to leave Spain. I don't think you can doubt that there is some very strong feeling which is boiling over for Catalan independence. And it seems like not just Spain, but the international community have dealt with it in the least sensible and sensitive way possible. Various EU countries have said that they don't recognise Catalan independence. They have not said that, hey, Mr. Spanish Prime Minister person, maybe have a vote on this? See what your people think? They've said, no, you're not independent. Which would be fine if it were 3 people in the back of a pickup truck declaring independence. But this is a large region. A wealthy region. Not that it would matter any less if the region were poor, but it's an important region. And of course that's why Spain doesn't want to give it up. But I don't see how you can call yourself a democracy if you ignore the people's right to self-governance. I mean, with things boiling up this much, you do have to wonder where the tensions are going to end. And that seems like a shame to me, because Europe doesn't really want any more conflict if it can avoid it. Which brings me on to my actual last thing that I wanted to briefly talk about, and this is in no way new. This is a book which I've currently been reading. So, some of you might be aware of the broadcaster and thinker and, I guess, what would be the best way to describe him? I don't really know. He's a guy called Maajid Nawaz. He has led an interesting life. And I'm reading a book about, essentially, the first few parts of that. He is Islamic, which is very important to this story. His family was from Pakistan, but he was born and raised in Britain, in Essex. And his experiences led him to become... Wow, my English is disappearing. And his experiences led him to become radicalized, and he actually travelled to Pakistan, to Denmark, to Egypt, all to try and set up radical Islamist cells. It's important to note that these are Islamist, not jihadist. There is an important difference. Islamism is the wish to impose Islam as a political system. It doesn't say anything about the use of violence. It doesn't say anything about terror. It's just to impose Islam as a political system, and oftentimes this will have very little to do with mainstream readings of the religion, and quite often the meetings of these groups will have much more to do with the politics than with the religion. So that was his life, until he got imprisoned in Egypt, because he was a member of a proscribed group, banned group, although Egypt didn't have any sort of right of free assembly, so pretty much every group that wasn't explicitly allowed was proscribed. So that's not a particularly special thing in and of itself. But he was imprisoned for a total of 5 years before he was taken as a prisoner of conscience by Amnesty International, at which point he ended up becoming rehabilitated, and he's now founded an anti-extremism organisation called Quilliam, which does work with various governments. It's just set up a chapter in the US, I believe, to fight extremism. And of course, who better than a former radical Islamist extremist to talk about how to prevent these sorts of things. Ooh. No idea what I hit. But I'm undamaged. That's good. But one of the things, I've not finished this book yet, but I've been following this guy for a while. He actually recently won. So Pink News is a queer-focused online newspaper. Let's head this way, I guess. It's a queer-focused online newspaper. Your lights mean nothing to me! And he recently won, I think he shared it with Lorraine Kelly, I think. Ooh. Just following the car in front of me blindly without actually looking where I was meant to be going. Whoopsie daisy. But he recently won their Broadcaster of the Year award. Which definitely shows how long he's come as radical Islamic thought generally isn't that queer friendly. But a lot of what he does is focus on what he calls the minorities within minorities. So that's to say, yeah, we've got to look out for minority people and make sure they aren't overwhelmed by the majority. So we don't want to see a recurrence of things like hacky bashing, where people who looked even vaguely South Asian were at threat of physical assault, not just from fists, but knives, hammers, and so on, just because of their skin colour. Not because of anything they did, just because what they looked like. So you want to protect those people, but you also don't want to do it at the expense of the minorities within those communities. So, for instance, you want to make sure that people who are Islamic aren't being assaulted by right-wing bigots. But you also want to make sure that these communities are treating their own properly. But there have been polls coming out with various numbers of, I think the most staggering was that 50% of British Muslims think that being homosexual should be illegal. Now the numbers on this might be off depending on polling methods, but I don't think it's a stretch to say that it is more difficult to be gay within a Muslim community than it is within a secular community, shall we say. Obviously, it's not just religion, it's not just Islam that has these problems. There are other social groupings which are similarly intolerant, and hashtag not all Muslims. Let's zoom in a little bit. And because it's more difficult for those people, for these minorities within minorities, we've got to keep an eye out for them and make sure that they are being treated well and that they have all the support they're needed, and that there isn't a horrible form of moral relativism which says, oh, it's just their culture. Right, that's one of the things that Maajid is particularly focuses on. He's also got a show on LBC, which is the London Broadcasting Corporation, I want to say. So if you're interested in the guy, have a look there. You should be able to listen online if you want to, or if you're within the London area, you can actually tune in. But the thing that struck me about this, okay, stop level 1. Let's get another job. The thing that really struck me about part of his early life, this was before he became radicalized. Oh, my coffee's started getting cold. That's unpleasant. Let's fill up from the cafeteria and hope that heats it up. Ah, there we go. Let's take that thing. The thing that really struck me already attached. Huh. I'm so used to... Did I take a quick job again accidentally? Have I been... I think I might have accidentally done that. Whoops. Or actually, maybe not. So, oh no, I am detached. Well, I'm just going slightly mad. So one of the stories he was saying in his book, called Radical, available at all good bookshops and Amazon, is... So I mentioned the Paki bashing which he underwent when he was younger. And this started forcing him into fight or flight type mentalities. He always ended up carrying a knife with him, which is clearly not a good thing. And one day he encountered... Is this where I wanted to be? Am I going mad? That's not where I wanted to be. Right. And one day he came across this group of... In fact, group is probably the wrong word. Let's say gang, because that's what it is. Gang of white youths whom he'd had quite a few troubles with before, who were coming towards him and his friends in a very menacing way. They all split up and went home. Okay, to the right. A few of them came out, so a total of 3 of them. This would be Maajid, his brother, and another friend of theirs. Came out. Maajid had his knife strapped behind his back, and presumably his other friends were similarly armed, but the people who were facing them down, were bigger and stronger, and there were more of them, and they were rattling baseball bats in a huge sign of intimidation. Until they started coming up to the group, and so they were staring across each other across a road, and they looked scared. They looked worried. And this had Maajid confused. Why should they be worried? There are more of them. They're bigger, they're stronger, they have longer weapons. Why should they be scared of us? And their leader, Mickey, asked to parley, to talk. So Mickey went across the middle of the road, and Maajid's brother Osman, his older brother Osman, went across the middle of the road, and they talked, and they talked, until they walked away from each other, and Mickey said to the gang that he was with to essentially go home. That nothing's going to happen here. That... Oh. A peace had been brokered. And after the fact, Maajid asked Osman, what happened? Why were they scared? Now this was in the 80s, I should mention. I believe it was the 80s. Before Islamic terrorism was a big thing. In the 80s in Britain, when you thought of bombs, you tended to think of the Irish. In the 80s in Britain, when I thought of bombs, I didn't think of bombs because I wasn't born yet, but it was time of the IRA. And Osman, when Maajid asked him what had happened, just pointed to his green rucksack and said, I told him that we're Muslim. We're not afraid to die. There are only 3 of us. Why would there be 3 of us here if we were afraid to die? There are more of you, you're bigger, you're stronger, you're better armed. We're not afraid to die. And in this green rucksack is a bomb, which we will detonate, and we will go to heaven, essentially. This is why we're not afraid to die. Where am I actually going? It'd be so helpful if they actually displayed my destination on that. Okay. Oh, did not want to press that button. Okay, so I'm going to Felixstowe, so I guess I want to go to Harwich. Definitely go to Hull. I want to go to Hull. Sorry. Ooh. And that seemed to start pushing Maajid, and I think Osman might have, according to the story that Maajid tells, already been a member of Hizb ut-Tahrir, which is the aforementioned Islamist organisation which Maajid got in trouble for being a part of. It was a method of self-defense. It was an extension of the knife. The knife scared away some people and kept him safe. Islamism scared away people and kept him safe. And that's a powerful thing, right? If you're not feeling safe, you will do pretty much anything to change that. And if you're exposed to enough people telling you a particular idea, you'll probably come to adopt that, regardless of how clever you are. People are incredibly good at rationalizing, and Maajid's an incredibly clever individual. It's not the case where he's some sort of dumb brute who just follows whatever. He's an intelligent and articulate individual, and that stuff doesn't just come from a conversion away from radical Islam. That's there the whole time. And that breaks my heart to know that it's because the police and the government and civil society failed to keep this brown person safe. Kept him from feeling included, like a part of society. That civil society failed at this put it in more danger. And from what I've been reading of Maajid's account, obviously other accounts differ depending on whom you are, and Maajid's experiences aren't universal and shouldn't be taken as such. But it seems to me that that feeling of individual safety play a much larger part in forging a person's ideals than various political actions that might take place in an area which isn't yours. Right? I mean, once Maajid started going in the direction of Islamism, the ideas of the West abandoning the Muslims in Bosnia, everything to do with America's policies, America and the rest of the world's policies in the Middle East and so on, those only helped reinforce what was already there. And it was that feeling of being unsafe, of needing a defense, that planted the seeds of radicalization. But anyway, I think this is going to be the last journey of the day. I'm actually surprised that I've managed to talk for as long as I have on this, to be quite frank. I'm hoping to do one of these a week as long as I've got things to talk about. They might not all be this long because, as I said, with some of these I've been going into the past. But there's a lot of past also to go into and interesting things to discuss. If any of you have anything you'd like me to talk about, or there's something that I've missed or gotten wrong, please talk about it in the comments. If you've enjoyed this video, if you found it interesting, even if you've disagreed with me, please do give it a like and subscribe to my channel, because then I'll be able to make more of these. If you've got something that you'd want me to talk about, as I said, put it in the comments. And yeah, I've got some other things going on my channel, so every week I usually have at least 2 impressions videos, whether they're inside or blind insides. Insides are games which I've played a bit and then essentially review, but I'm not too fussed about getting to the end of them. The blind inside ones are the ones where I buy it, I might have a bit of a play about in it just to get sound levels right and so on, because my sound recording software doesn't actually save the audio track from the game and my own personal audio track as separate layers or anything, so I kind of need to get it right first time. But so I might do that much, and then I will just play it and give you my impressions of it. I also do a Hitman featured contract each week. The next one will be up tomorrow. Oh. Please say I'm not damaged. Yes! I've really not driven well this voyage. I'm amazed that I'm still in perfect health. And each Thursday I also upload a continuation of my Deus Ex Mankind Divided playthrough, which I'm a little bit... Oh. Come on, Annemie, just get to the end. Do it perfectly. So I'm a little bit of the way through that now, so if you're interested in that, there are a good few episodes for you to binge. But apart from that, I do hope that you have a lovely rest of your day. And I guess I'll say goodbye. Goodbye!